Part 1. You will hear a conversation between a student and an optometrist during an eye checkup. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now listen and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello, how can I help you?
Hi, I have an appointment at 11 o'clock with the optician. I'm a bit early.
Are you James Park?
Yes, that's me.
I'm Laura Bennett, the optician today. Please come in and take a seat.
Thanks a lot.
Before we start the eye test, I need to get a few personal details. So, James, what's your full name?
James Robert, that's Robert, and my surname is Park, P-A-R-K.
And your date of birth, James?
The 3rd of August, 1991.
The 13th of August?
No, just the 3rd.
Oh, sorry. 1991. My brother is the same age. What's your current address?
I'm staying at a student dormitory.
Which one?
It's at University Hall, quite close to here on Hillside Lane.
University Hall. And are you covered by any health insurance?
Yes, I've got full coverage.
Which company is it with?
It's with Total Health Plan.
Total Health?
No. People always confuse that. It's Total Health Plan. They're part of a larger insurance provider.
Got it. Now, James, have you ever had an eye exam before?
Yes, I had one, but that was a while ago, back in school.
So about when was that?
I'd say around October 2008. Actually, maybe it was the previous year, October 2007. And my sight was perfectly fine back then.
But now you're experiencing some trouble?
Yes. Since starting college, I've had some issues with seeing things far away. Distance vision's the problem.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
All right, let's take a look. I'll begin by covering your right eye. Can you read the top line for me?
Sure. LDVP.
Well, James, your eyesight has definitely declined a bit since your last check, and I think you'll need glasses. Not all the time and not for close reading, but definitely for driving.
Right. I had a feeling that might be the case.
Now it's time to choose a pair of frames. As you can see, there's a big selection.
Could you give me an idea of the price differences? I was thinking of rimless glasses.
Were you? Well, prices really vary, but rimless styles tend to be the priciest. The cheapest are the ones with full rims.
Maybe I'll choose those instead.
Or perhaps consider these half-rim ones.
They're not bad.
Yes, they look quite nice and they're durable, far less likely to break than the frameless ones.
That's a good point. All right, I'll take those.
If you return next Wednesday, I should have them ready. You can pay when you collect them.
Thank you. Can I pay by bank card?
You can, but there's a small fee for that.
Oh, then I'll pay in cash, if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine. Cash, bank card, debit, whichever suits you. See you on Wednesday.
That is the end of part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2. You will hear a tour guide giving a talk about the Taj Mahal, describing its history and architectural features. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen and answer questions 11 to 16.
The Taj Mahal attracts more visitors than any other monument in India. Tourists from all over the world admire it not only for its breathtaking beauty, but also for the emotions it represents. Many people call it a symbol of love. However, not everyone realizes that it was built as a tomb for the emperor's wife, not just as a grand palace or temple. Emperor Shah Jahan ordered the construction of the Taj Mahal to honor the memory of his beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal after she passed away. She had died while giving birth to her 14th child, and her death left him heartbroken. At first, he planned to build a second structure for himself out of black marble on the other side of the river, but this dream never became reality. Instead, the two now rest side by side inside the same tomb in the heart of the white marble monument. Shah Jahan held deep appreciation for both architecture and jewelry, and the Taj Mahal shows both of these passions in a remarkable way. To make the Taj Mahal, he gathered the finest architects and craftsmen not only from different regions of India, but also from distant countries such as Persia and Turkey. These skilled workers worked day and night for over 20 years. They used white marble, which came from the state of Rajasthan, about 300 kilometers away. 1,000 elephants carried the heavy stones to this site. Artisans brought jade and crystal from China, sapphires from Sri Lanka, and turquoise from Tibet. The entire building sparkles with semi-precious stones and intricate carvings. But the Taj Mahal is not only about the central tomb. There is much more to explore in its vast complex. Before walking through the garden, it's helpful to understand the layout. The tour begins at the main entrance, which is called the main gateway. On the map, it's marked with an X. Once you pass through this gateway, you enter a beautiful formal garden. Two marble-lined canals cross in the center with fountains along the way. These canals divide the garden into 4 large quarters. Each of those 4 parts has 4 flower beds, making a total of 16. Gardeners still maintain the traditional plant layout, using seasonal flowers and native shrubs. The tomb does not stand in the center of the garden, as many people expect. Instead, it rises from the northern end. In the middle of the garden, halfway between the tomb and the gateway, there is a raised pool. This pool reflects the full image of the Taj Mahal. On clear days, the reflection creates an almost perfect mirror image of the building, which adds to its magical effect. Flanking the tomb on both sides are red sandstone buildings. To the west, you'll find a mosque that faces Makkah and continues to be used for prayer. On the eastern side, there's a building that looks almost identical to the mosque. It's known as the rest house. Because it faces away from Makkah, people never used it for religious purposes.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Many historians have debated the purpose of the rest house. Some believe it offered shelter to travelers. Others think people used it as a meeting hall or community space. But the most widely accepted explanation is that the emperor included it to create symmetry in the overall design of the Taj Mahal complex. Now let's take a look at the clever water system behind the gardens. This system had to supply water constantly to the plants and fountains. Workers pulled water from the nearby river using a rope and bucket setup powered by bullocks. They moved the water through a wide stone channel and stored it in tanks built at different heights. These tanks then sent the water through underground pipes to each fountain. Under each fountain, a copper pot helped regulate the water pressure. The system worked smoothly and evenly, showing just how advanced their engineering really was.
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 2. Part 3. You will hear a conversation between a tutor and 2 students, presenting their findings about maize production. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 24.
Good morning, everyone. So, following on from our last session on South American farming, Lena and Mark are going to speak about the most widely cultivated crop in Africa, which is, of course, maize. Mark, would you like to start?
Sure. We've been researching the importance of maize across different countries, how it's produced, and how output can be increased. As you probably know, maize is a staple food across the African continent, and in fact, 85% of the global maize is grown and consumed there. Lena's done some work on its origins.
Yes, well, maize was originally a wild grain that came from the subtropical regions of Africa, but nowadays there are hundreds of varieties with different features. For example, some types are desert adapted, others can survive heavy rain, and a few have a distinctive aroma. But whatever the variety, maize always requires a great deal of water.
How much water are we talking about?
Around 4,500 liters are needed to produce just 1 kilogram of maize. This water can come naturally or through irrigation systems. And since most maize-growing areas deal with irregular rainfall and dry spells, managing water is absolutely critical.
That's why research has become essential. Now, every maize-producing country in Africa has set up its own research center, whether that's in Nigeria, Kenya, or Zambia. And these are coordinated by a central agency based in Ghana called the African Maize Innovation Institute.
Fascinating.
In Zambia, for example, they've been successfully applying different maize breeds and soil treatments for over 25 years. But because the country lies in a floodplain, water doesn't drain easily during the rainy season. So they have to use special maize strains that can endure the excess moisture. And with climate change, the need is more urgent than ever.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Now let's move on to our country comparison. As you can probably guess, Nigeria is the top maize-producing nation in Africa. Altogether, Nigerians likely consume over 2.5 billion servings of maize daily.
That's quite impressive.
And beyond food, maize holds cultural significance too.
We compared Nigeria with Uganda. Interestingly, although Uganda only has a population of around 45 million, it is the largest exporter of maize in Africa, not Nigeria, surprisingly.
Really?
Yes, Uganda exports to numerous places, especially to Asia as well as Europe and the Americas. One reason for this success is the growing demand for golden maize, a variety that's become quite trendy abroad. People are curious to try something new.
Plus, Uganda has ideal conditions for maize cultivation, plenty of sunshine, and a good supply of fresh water.
Speaking of Nigeria again, it's worth noting that researchers at the Maize Institute in Enugu are working on increasing productivity while reducing water usage.
By productivity, you mean they're trying to grow more on less land?
Exactly. They're aiming to develop maize that's more nutritious, tastier, and healthier, not just starchy, but enriched with essential vitamins.
A smart idea, given how central maize is to the diet.
And then we looked at South Africa, which doesn't import maize at all. It's completely self-sufficient thanks to high import tariffs. That's why the local market prefers domestically grown maize. Exports are minimal.
Though maize is highly respected there, its consumption has dropped to nearly half of what it was back in the 1970s. This trend hasn't been observed in Nigeria or Uganda.
That's quite interesting, especially since you mentioned maize having cultural value in South Africa. It plays a symbolic role in Uganda too, right?
Yes, definitely. There's a national planting event held every year. The president personally plants the first seeds and blesses the harvest. Farmers travel to the capital city to attend this ceremony.
What about organic farming? Is there a market for organic maize?
Absolutely. South Africans have recently started to develop a taste for it. There's a trial farm near Bloemfontein in the maize heartland famous for its cornmeal, by the way, that began producing organic maize and now sells it across the entire nation. It's similar to how golden maize became popular in Uganda, though that's mostly for international buyers.
It's always interesting to see how food habits evolve. Thanks, both of you.
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 3. Part 4. You will hear a lecture explaining how to write radio scripts that sound natural and engaging. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 33. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 33.
Today, we're going to explore some of the core techniques involved in writing for broadcast audio. It's essential to understand that a radio script is crafted not to be read on a page, but to be spoken aloud and heard by listeners. Actually, doing this can be more challenging than it sounds, because it requires us to let go of many of the formal writing habits we've been taught since school. That's because when writing for audio, the focus should be on how it sounds. Words on a page carry information, yes, but they don't automatically communicate things like rhythm, stress, or pacing. So these elements must be clearly marked within the script. Everything said on air, whether it's an introduction to a travel segment, a restaurant review, or a report in a news bulletin, should sound like it's coming straight from the speaker's mind. In other words, it should feel like part of a natural conversation, rather than something obviously being read aloud.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 34 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 34 to 40.
Before putting pen to paper, it really helps to identify your audience. Try to visualize a single listener who represents the typical crowd for your station. Say you're preparing a review of a science fiction movie for a student station. Think about how you describe it to your younger brother. Or if you're doing a review of a jazz concert, imagine explaining it to a friend who's into music. Listeners will connect more with your content if they feel you're speaking directly to them. That means your tone should be casual and inviting. Instead of using distant phrases like our audience or the listeners, try saying us or we. These words pull people in and make your script feel more personal. Once you know who you're addressing, you'll need to decide what you want to say and how to say it. Don't forget that your audience can't ask you to clarify, and you don't have the chance to go back and repeat yourself. So your script needs to be clear and well organized from start to finish. Avoid overwhelming your listeners with too many statistics or facts too close together. Too many facts too close together will cause confusion. Space them out naturally. The most effective scripts paint a picture in the listener's mind. For instance, instead of saying a bridge is 120 meters long, say it stretches as far as 3 school buses parked end to end. Or if you're describing a crowd, don't just say there were 10,000 people. Instead, compare it to a packed football stadium. Now, all scripts need something that will grab the attention of the listener. You need something that will make them say, hey, I want to stop and listen to this. So the first sentence has to do this for you. It needs to be intriguing, interesting, and then it needs to be backed up by a second sentence that explains what you're talking about. The last sentence should also give your listeners food for thought and can be in the form of a question or a statement that sums up the item. Finally, once you finish your draft, it's important to polish it. The best way to do that is by reading it out loud. That way you can check how natural it sounds and catch any phrases that might trip you up when speaking. You might discover tricky word combinations, unnatural pauses, or overly formal wording. Reading aloud also helps you hear the flow of your sentences and check whether the pacing works well for someone listening in real time. It's a simple but powerful technique for making your radio script truly listener-friendly.
That is the end of part 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 4.